Welcome to the WP Builds podcast, bringing you the latest news from the WordPress community. Now, welcome your hosts, David Waumsley and Nathan Wrigley.
Hello there and welcome to the WP Builds podcast. This is episode 146, entitled Refining Our Website Building Process with James and Martin Coates. It was published on Thursday the 19th of September 2019. My name's Nathan Wrigley from pictureandword.co.uk, a small web development agency based in the north of England. And just before we begin, I've got a few links I'd like you to follow. Please head over to the wpbuilds.com website, and over there you're going to find a whole bunch of links in the menu at the top. But the first link I'd like to mention is the subscribe link. It's wpbuilds.com/subscribe. If you head over there, you can join our mailing list. Got two mailing lists, one just to inform you about this podcast coming out, and the other one about deal alerts that are coming up. And there's also links on there so that you can subscribe to us on your favourite podcast player. Join our Facebook group of over 2,200 WordPressers, all being incredibly polite and helpful, I have to say. And there's things like links to our YouTube channel and Twitter feed and all that stuff as well. The other link I'd like to mention is wpbuilds.com/deals. It's a bit like Black Friday, but every day of the week. We've got a whole bunch of deals on there. If you head over there, if you're in the market for some WordPress plugin or theme or service, head over there, because you never know, you might find a coupon code to get yourself some significant discount. People are making use of those every day, I think, so that's absolutely fabulous. And thanks to all the people who've contributed those coupon codes for their product. I'm sure our community are very appreciative. And the last one probably to mention at this point is wpbuilds.com/advertise. It does help to keep this podcast going, the revenue that we create from advertisers. Very grateful to those people who advertise, and I would certainly welcome some more of you if you'd like to get your WordPress product or service in front of a wider audience, a bit like these guys have done. The WP Builds podcast was brought to you today by WP Feedback. Are client communications eating up all of your time? If so, check out WP Feedback, a visual feedback tool for WordPress that is specifically designed to get you and your clients on the same page. Check out wpfeedback.co. And Cloudways. Cloudways is a managed cloud-based hosting platform for WordPress. Unlike others, they let you choose the server from top cloud providers like Google Cloud, Amazon, and DigitalOcean. And there are no restrictions on the number of websites per server. Try Cloudways using promo code WPBuilds and get $20 free hosting credit. And the Page Builder Framework. Do you use a page builder to create your websites? The Page Builder Framework is a mobile, responsive and lightning-fast WordPress theme that works with Beaver Builder, Elementor, Breezy and other page builders. With its endless customization options in the WordPress Customizer, it's the perfect fit for you or your agency. Go to wp-pagebuilderframework.com today. And we truly do, as I said, really honestly do thank those sponsors for keeping the WP Builds podcast going. Okay, what have we got in store for you today? Episode 146. It's called Refining Our Website Building Process with James and Martin Coates. Well, it's often David and I that are having chats about processes and things like that. But today we've got two brothers from the UK, James and Martin. They've got an agency called Impact Media, and they go through how they did a recent project. They talk specifically about all of the wonderful tools that they've come across. So some of those are SaaS apps, and then we also talk about the WordPress plugins that they have as their chosen plugin for a particular problem. And it's a really interesting chat. It kind of lifts the lid on a different agency. So if you're a freelancer or an agency owner, you might get some useful tips about how to do things, and we take it in a sort of chronological approach. So the first thing that we mention is the first thing that is done in the project, and then we go through the project and the tools that they use to achieve it. So it's a wonderful chat, and I hope that you enjoy it. Hello there, welcome once again to the WP Builds podcast. Thank you for joining us today. A little bit of an interesting diversion. We're often talking about plugins, we talk about themes, we have I don't know, people who developers on talking about the plugin that they've built and so on and so forth. But today we're going to be talking about process. And we have, all the way from Essex in the UK, we have two gentlemen, Martin and James Coates, who I met twice now at WordCamp in Manchester. Hi, guys.
How you doing?
How you doing?
Very good. Yeah, we've had quite a nice chat before this podcast was recorded, and we've talked a lot about a particular project that this couple and their company, Impact Media, which you can find at impactmedia.co.uk. No spaces, nothing like that. Because they've recently had a project that they've I'll say completed. Let's use that word. I think it's nearly completed. And on this podcast, we never really dwell on the process. A lot of us are freelancers, and so we spend a lot of time working on our own process. If I was to work for a big company, a large blue chip company, I would be told what to do all the time, and I would have to follow the guidelines. Whereas, turns out as freelancers, we've all got our own process. So the guys today are going to talk us through a website build they did recently, and the things that they used to get it from conception to completion. And it's really interesting because it's a lot of the stuff they used is new to me. You've probably heard of some of it, but not all of it. So I don't know who's going to talk first, either Martin or James. That's always going to be the fun bit. Who's going to interrupt who? Tell us about this little project that you've had going recently, or large project, what it's been about, what you were trying to achieve, and what the brief was. And then we'll get into what it was that you did to complete it.
Of course. So, Martin here. We had a client we've been working with for several years, and we've been lucky enough to do a rebuild for one of their consumer-facing sites several years ago, which actually introduced them to WordPress. As that's gone along with the rest of the company, they're a worldwide company that going over 110 years, and it was their big corporate site that needed doing, as well as their 24 other global sites. And at that time of discussion, they were, I believe, fixed, separate sites. Being that we already got the client on board with WordPress, our aim was to deliver them a multi-site environment on WordPress that they could overarching control. So the task not only just came with kind of a refresh and reskin, but also introduced lots of other requests in terms of stockist locators for their products. They provide bakery ingredients across the globe, and a lot of them had their own products and recipe databases. So we had to work with them on designing the back-end interface of WordPress to get their content in, to obviously output it for the public to view. And along the way, we obviously used a lot of tools, and there's several plugins that we use to obviously deliver the final project. Now, the project was split into three phases. Phase one was the corporate site, which is live, and that's Bakels, BAKELS.com. That's the overarching site that then links to the sub-sites. And the second phase was to deliver the UK site, and that came, let's say, with more bells and whistles. That kind of had all the functionality, all the features, all of the custom work that they required built into that local site. And then the third phase was to take that second site and clone it for the rest of the world to use, but put their own information in terms of products, recipes, news posts and stockists. And that is where we are with the project. Currently, from South America all the way through to the Philippines, crossing China, they're all logging in, adding their content. And what made it really good was obviously the tools along the way. So let me know if you want me to.
Yeah, we'll get onto that, I think, in due course. But needless to say, this is not your brochure website for the baker living down the road. This is a much larger affair. You've got a multilingual site, 25 sites, each with their own language and user input data, which has got to be spat out onto the front end and so on and so forth. So it's a big deal. How many guys do you have working with you in order to accomplish sites of this magnitude?
It wasn't an easy project. There's 6 of us in total. So everyone obviously, done their bit. And it definitely was one of the largest projects we've done as a company to date.
Yeah. When I go around the process of building a website, I often find myself at the minute speaking with the co-host of this podcast, David Waumsley, and we to and fro our processes, and although we've got a very different process, we've got a fairly similar array of tools that we use to achieve certain things. We've got a suite of plugins that we always rely on, a suite of SaaS apps that we rely on, and he's on Windows, so he uses such and such a thing, and I'm on a Mac and I use such and such a thing. So that brings me to this question. Let's go through the list of tools that you've been using in order to achieve this project. I mean, it's a given we're using WordPress. Is this current site, before we get onto the list of tools, is it using multi-site now, or is it just a whole bunch of single installs of WordPress?
It is a multi-site.
Right. Okay. So we've got I have in front of my eyes a list of the tools that we've used. Many of them are SaaS apps. Some of them, as we'll get to later, are WordPress plugins. Again, I don't mind which one wants to talk it through with us, but if you want to go through that list, possibly in that order, because it makes perfect sense to be in that order, what you use and why you use it, starting with the first one called Slick Plan.
Yeah, so to be honest, Slick Plan is we use it for collecting content from the client. So where we've been in the scenario in the past, we're creating Word docs and files, and and we're doing everything through email. We looked at a centrally managed system that if the client was to hire in a copywriter, the copywriter could jump in and provide content, provide images. We can help set up the sitemap and then create the actual pages that we need content for under that site architecture. So it's not like, it's just basically reducing the amount of Word docs and emails getting miscommunicated. And to be honest, it helps us when we're in our early wireframing stage. We tend to sort of work out a content outline, and we help to inform the client what they should be using on the site, if they need tabbed areas, if they need this amount of text, etc. So after the wireframe has been signed up and we know this page might have this amount of number of words on it, or it's got a slider, it's got a paragraph there, we can actually input that the field into Slick Plan to say that we need 100 words for this, we need a photo for here, and really Slick Plan is used to just allow the client really to log in and provide the information, and it's very skin and bones as well. It's not overly complicated to use, and as I say, from the not been using it too long, but in the last sort of 18 months, clients have been using that and seem to get on it relatively well.
Yeah, I've never heard of this one. I've tried a myriad different number of ways of getting this sort of thing done, from designing the wireframe, which I tend to do a little bit less than I ever used to, and then sending it off, and then they would criticize it, and then I'd do it again and then send it off, and they'd criticize it, and then you know what I mean, it's that back and forward with email. So the idea of this is it's one tool which you now favor, and it's sitemap building. I'm just reading off their website at the moment. Content planning, diagram making, and you can do mock-ups as well. But the best part of this is because you've got a team, 6 of you plus presumably copywriters coming out of your, the wazoo, and graphic designers and what have you. They can all be given credentials and log into this one system, just to give you an idea of what the site will look like before you actually start doing any real work on it.
In terms of content planning, I believe the guys here, the devs, there is a plugin so you can actually import that into your WordPress install out the box, just to make life a little bit easier rather than a copy and paste or an import exercise.
Yeah. Was there any tool that you used previously that you fell out of love with?
I can't remember off the top of my head whether it was called SiteTree. It was. We've used Gather Content in the past.
Yeah,
Gather Content.
But I think it's Gather Content was a lovely system as well. It all depends on the type of clients and their expertise in it. It sometimes needs to kick off and a bit of onboard training, like with some of the other tools that we mentioned later. But once they got the know-how, it's fine. But in some cases at that time, I think this is going back a few years ago now, it was like Word doc days, sending it in because that was easier. But you find things get missed off, and this is where this becomes much more managed, and then you can lock it down and sign it off.
Are you going to be sticking with this tool?
We've got no plans to move on to another one at this moment in time, unless James has any.
Yeah, I like new and shiny. So
Yes, that's the problem, isn't it? Me too.
well, Slick Plan originally was literally just used for creating site trees and site maps. So that's all we used it for, and we used gather content after Slick Plan. It was only when we developed this as you can add content to it now, it just seemed that we didn't need gather content anymore. And it's, it was like any business, you want to reduce your sort of monthly overheads, and it was probably a monthly subscription gather content. So if you've got a plugin or an app that does two things, it made sense just to sort of stick with Slick Plan.
Well, also you've got to think of the client, because you don't want them logging into so many different systems with different login access, because then it will cheese them off as well.
Yeah, I was wondering about that, because we are going to go through like a fairly small laundry list of plugins, and I was wondering about the sort of burden of kind of logging into this, and then a couple of weeks later, okay, we've finished that stage. Here's the next thing, and here's the next thing. But presumably, again, like everything, if you write it all down and make it a process, those emails can be sent out fairly trivially. So we're happy with this one. We like Slick Plan. I've never used it, so I can't speak about what I think of it, but you guys seem to like it, so I'll take that as a good one. So in the initial phase, the wireframing and gathering little bits of content from the client, Slick Plan is your go-to. And then the next one on the list is probably something that most of us will touch at some point, whether that's us in-house doing it or getting somebody else to do it. It's making designs and so on. And your favoured weapon of choice for that, well, the first one you've got mentioned is sketchapp.com, which probably most of us just know as Sketch. Why that one? Why not Photoshop?
Well, we used to. I'm a proper advocate of Photoshop and have been for many years. That's where I started sort of visual sort of years and years ago. And it was just always having a large PSD file. We had multiple sort of artboards. Like we've got, a folder of, say, 30 different pages, 30 different PSDs. Whereas when we got introduced to Sketch, you've got one file. You can have mobile view, tablet view, you can have desktop view, you can have each of the pages running side by side. You can share symbols as assets. It saved a hell of a lot of time. And with Photoshop, we just found the actual process to be quite slow. Although I think that they've integrated multiple artboards now, and I think you can do a lot with smart objects, so you can link files. But Sketch was already doing that, and it loads a lot quicker. It saves a lot of time, and I think it was about 2015-ish. I think we fully moved over from Photoshop to Sketch. We still use Photoshop if you've got to create clipping paths or if you're doing some heavy image manipulation or something, we'd do that in Photoshop, but then ultimately you'd be importing that or copying it into Sketch. And I think the other big factor for the Sketch move was the export features. In Photoshop, it's a little bit sort of fiddly to get sort of retina images out, whereas Sketch allows you to sort of export individual assets and retina sort of ready images as well. So it's been a big plus for us, really, isn't it? Good time saver.
Yeah, it seems to be the direction of travel. There seem to be a lot of people who are fed up with the Adobe pricing structure for their creative suite. I mean, not fed up, just when there's an alternative like Sketch, which is super affordable, and so many people seem to be adopting it. It seems like a bit of a no-brainer. I have it. I confess I'm no expert with it. This is not my area of expertise at all, design. Where did you pick up the skills? How did you become adept at using Sketch? Was it like a YouTube binge, or do you have a course that you recommend? Or
trial and error.
One of the guys here used it.
One of our designers uses it as and I think he started using it in his free time. So when he come to work, he was using Photoshop, and then when he was creating stuff at home, he'd be using Sketch. And he came in, he said, "Oh, check this out once," and I think I overlooked it first. And Photoshop is my baby, and I've completely, I know we're not going to use it. He would start using it for projects here, and it was only when sort of he'll be using it for projects anyway, and then I start using it, and you force yourself to use it, and you see a lot of the similarities of all these apps. And I think we're going to touch on InVision and things like that. There's lots of apps that do a lot of very similar things. It's just understanding where they keep that particular function. And as soon as you get your head around it,
some of it would have been self-taught. We had Linda training. We had Treehouse, Udemy courses, things like that from time to time.
Or Google.
Good old Google.
Good old Google. If you need to do something, it's Sketch app, whatever it is, and it tells you what to do. So,
my opinion of Sketch is that it's going to just sort of keep going and going, and potentially become kind of the default for people in our industry. And obviously, this is not something which the clients are going to be interacting with. It's difficult to, Sketch. Presumably, there's a career in being really, really good at using this app. Your clients are not going to touch it. So yeah, great. I totally appreciate that one.
We're doing some work for someone that has their own in-house development team.
Mm-hmm.
And I know this might help sort of listeners, but I know that it doesn't work on PC. Because we've sent the files across to them, and they struggle to open it. And I think that's when we introduce them to InVision, so you can kind of pull the assets out. But I know for PC, it's not a PC app, it's just for Mac.
There you go. I did not. I've been in the Mac system for so long that I kind of don't even look into that anymore. Yeah. We should probably check. Let's go to the download page or something and find out.
This is the funny thing though, because you come on board several years ago with it, and it does evolve, and then you use it. So it may have had a PC one. You never know since. It's one of those things, but we haven't got a PC here. So
their site is seriously nice. I really like the way their site looks. That's just
designed in Photoshop.
That's genius. Imagine if it was. Imagine the shame. Right, the next one on the list then. So that was basic sort of graphic design and what have you. The next one on the list is one that I've heard of many times, but never used at all. And that's InVision app, it's InVision, which you can find at invisionapp.com. I don't really even know what the proposition for this is. I don't even know why somebody needs this. What does it do that the other software doesn't? So
predominantly for the larger projects that require custom page template designs or very in-depth, let's say advanced or high-definition wireframing, we obviously use Sketch, and then Sketch talks to InVision and pushes those files. And it allows us to then share the InVision screens where you can stitch together a walkthrough wireframe for the client then to have access to make comments. So it helps us in more of a collaboration with the client. And InVision have been evolving over the years because James mentioned earlier about the assets. So you could hand the InVision file over to a developer, and they wouldn't actually need a Sketch license. They wouldn't need to install Sketch because they can actually get all their assets they need out of InVision, even down to some of the style settings and everything. So we've found that to be really helpful, with clients. We have tried other systems. We have tried one that's growing, I believe, called Avocode. But at the time we were using it's probably a couple of years ago, it was being a bit buggy for us on some of the larger projects.
Right.
And that's a very similar tool that does things like that and gives you kind of the styles used from your style sheets. But I think InVision's been a good move because Sketch talks to InVision. And then recently InVision, I believe, have bought a thing called TrackDuck, which is the next tool we'll talk about in a sec. So it's going in the right direction. It's if they're all making a nice flow.
Okay.
And it comes into handy for the larger projects to sign off from a design and wireframing perspective.
Yep.
Yeah, so that workflow for clients, once we've, as Martin mentioned, that we've done the wireframe and we want some feedback on it, InVision allows you to make those comments.
So give an example of that one. The client, the multi-site global one that we developed, they wanted a custom product catalog built. So we've done a custom product and recipe plugin in the back end. We mapped their existing database system, but we had to put things in place. And I'm kind of not getting it wrong because it would have been very expensive and timely for both parties if we did. So the wireframing was very detailed down to the values, the options to get a sign-off. Because obviously from that, this is just the back end of WordPress, we got a sign-off. The client knew all the fields, the options that we're going to have, the requirements. It made the development a whole lot easier internally and also saved less questions at the end of, I thought it was going to work like this, kind of thing.
Yeah. So were you using this before you came to Sketch, or was it the amalgamation of Sketch with this that kind of sealed the deal? Right.
Sketch first.
We were using Photoshop, but from the reason that Sketch and InVision work so well together is through Photoshop we're exporting or saving sort of JPEG layouts of the individual pages, then uploading all the pages to InVision and then putting them into the order that you wanted to allow the client to walk them through.
Right, more work.
Pardon?
More work, stuff to do.
Yeah. Sketch actually allows you to sort of automatically send you don't even need to export the pages. It automatically talks to InVision and puts the page together for you. So when you're doing revisions, it also sends that automatically and then creates a little history afterwards as well.
Okay. If none of this is making sense to you, apologies, but if that makes perfect sense to you and yet you don't know how to do it, check in the show notes, and I'm sure these guys will get in the Facebook group and make the connection with you and give you some information about how to connect Sketch with InVision if you want to, if you want to demonstrate to your clients through the InVision app.
There's a plugin called Craft. By InVision as well.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what allows you to collect Sketch to InVision.
Okay, great, good stuff. Okay, never use that one. Me being me, just one person, I tend to make the layouts, and I'm quite happy to make those modifications. But then we move on to we've built the wireframe, we've done things in Sketch, we've shown it all with the syncing through Craft with InVision. We've got like a nice a mock-up. It's got all of the bells and whistles. We know what we're doing. And now we move on to something called TrackDoc, which I've never heard of before. What on earth is TrackDoc?
So after the sign-off of the visuals, it's obviously down to development. We haven't put any kind of internal tools for development and code and whatsoever, but it's when it gets to the point on the staging server, ready for sign-off. TrackDoc is like InVision, but it allows you to walk you through the actual working gubbins of the site and make markup and comments. So we use it internally and also externally for clients to then make feedback, because that's when your navigations come live, your sliders come live, all your transitional elements come live, and you can then use TrackDoc to make those comments. And you can put links in to say, if you have got something wrong or there's got to be a change, you can hyperlink to the reference that you mean, and you can actually see a working example. So it's another kind of collaboration tool that, again, saves a lot of time than getting a big email with 400 million bullet points and not knowing what part on the page you're talking about or what slide.
Yeah, exactly. The third one down under the picture of the cow. Yeah.
And then you can obviously, with a lot of these, you can then assign those to task members as tasks. To individuals, and they can be marked off as completed, basically.
So there's quite a large gap between using InVision, when that presumably gets you some kind of sign-off and the design is all good. Then you go away, the communication to some extent disappears between you and the client, and you've built it. And presumably at this point, we've been in WordPress, we've designed the site, we've got a working version ready. And then we use TrackDoc to get feedback about the site. How does TrackDoc integrate? Is it a plugin? Is there a plugin? Is it a plugin for WordPress, or is it just like a snippet of JavaScript or something like that?
So this one is a Chrome extension. I believe they might have a Firefox extension that installs. Once you've set the site up and shared it with the client, that's all they need to kind of make the comments.
Put a snippet of code in the site.
We have to put a snippet of code in the site if you're doing, I believe, feedback on mobile, something like that. Forgive me, it's more the developers. Sorry, but for what we know, InVision have recently, well, it's probably a year ago now, have bought TrackDoc out. So whether there's plans to then make that more synchronized, without coming out and using another system, we don't know if that's in the pipeline. But as I say, I'm not sure if there's a WordPress plugin on it for TrackDoc. I know there is a snippet of code for one project.
So if I'm a client and I visit this site, and you've obviously instructed me, go and install this in your Chrome browser and go to the website, what does that allow me to do? Can I literally click on parts of the site and then make commentary on that? Like, okay, I don't like that font on the heading of that page. The red here is not the red I'm after. I want something slightly darker, and so on and so forth. Can they actually just click and comment on the site?
Yes, they can click anywhere. And like I say, if you picture from visuals, if you're then scrolling down the page or a slider's moving, it will then detect where on that page and drop that comment, basically, and you end up with a big comment list.
Okay. And do you get like an email that you can then assign to various team members and so on? Sort of like, this is your job, you do that one, you do that one.
You've got it, yeah.
That's cool. I like that. I confess, I've got a WordPress equivalent up my sleeve. There's one called Project Huddle. projecthuddle.io, which I'm sure quite a few of our listeners have heard of. So very similar. You install a WordPress plugin inside of your main website. So in my case, it might be wpbuilds.com. And then when your site goes to their website to inspect it, so long as they've logged in to your website, they get the same functionality and they can upload things and they can comment on things. Do you find this step, because this is quite a new idea, isn't it? This can't have been, the technology for this didn't exist 5 years ago. Have you been inundated with like meaningless comments that really were best kept to themselves, or do the clients use it frugally and give you decent feedback, or was it?
It depends on if the advantage we like with these. Obviously, it's nice always talking to client or for feedback. Sometimes you can't always arrange them right times, so these sort of tools work well for them. They might be providing comments late at night if it's convenient to them, but then they might share that with other members, and then you might get feedback that might not have been on the same wavelength, say, for your journey with working, say, with the marketing manager or so on. So you might get the odd comment come in, but then it's a good thing to say, yeah, I like the idea. We can put that on the backlog as a feature request if you now want it to do this, or things like that. So it's not the end of the world, and it gets documented and either shut down or moved to kind of a backlog.
Yep. And do you curate who gets to make these comments? So, for example, with your the site that we've been talking about, this sort of bakery site, I'm going to call it. In an ideal world, one person makes those decisions, not an army of people who, write conflicting comments on the exact same part of the website. The font's wrong. Oh, I love the font. The color's wrong. I love that color. It's exactly right. How do you manage expectations and conflicts? Do you have a conversation with them, insisting that there's one point of contact, or?
Yeah. So with this particular project, our main point of contact was the UK marketing manager. He then liaise with other parties, but he was our main contact. And obviously since the launch of all the other sites, he's still liaising with those, and it's worked very well because we can just get one big list of things or feedback in one setting, rather, like you say, than people saying the same thing over and over again.
Yeah. How long do you typically allow this process to go on for? Do you give it like a week? Do you step away and do something else? Work on another project, or are you reacting as these little tickets come in, or do you kind of leave it for a week and see what happens?
It depends on the size of the project, but if you imagine a site, say it had, and also it depends if you're delivering it in phases. So sometimes we deliver things in phases where they might just get the homepage, and then they'll provide feedback and we'll provide a window, whilst we can provide design for 2 or 3 other pages, and then it's not too much for them to sign off. But we would only generally work on making the changes after it's all been closed off. So that does differ, but we wouldn't literally wait for a comment and work on it straight away, because sometimes you remove the comment or see something else somewhere else and it wouldn't be efficient. So we kind of wait for all their feedback, lock it down, then book the changes.
Yeah. It's interesting, although we've got a very different process and a very different set of tools, deep down we've got the same idea. We want things to work smoothly, and we've obviously stumbled across a way of doing it. You're going to stick with TrackDoc? Any reason to move away? Has it proved to be worth its? Well, I was going to say proved to be worth what it costs, but I can't figure out what the cost is, because all there is a login button.
I know. I think the plan we were on, I think it might have been $29 or $59 a month for a certain tier that we were on at the time.
Okay.
Did run into some issues with it when GDPR came in. It was some weird thing that happened with the Chrome browser we ran an issue with. And we needed to we did raise something with support, and because we were under a bit of pressure with the client, I did use another system introduced called Zipboard, which isn't too bad. I think it's a developing company on there, but it's very interesting for what you mentioned earlier with your kind of Project Huddle. I'd be very interested to take a deeper look at that as well, because I like unlimited licenses. I personally don't like us having them X amount of sites or be restricted to users and so on. So I'll definitely be having a look at that. But overall, I like the interface. I like how TrackDuck works, and whilst integrate with InVision, I think it's still a good move to stay with them if we can.
I think that every stage here, the actual philosophy of what you're trying to do won't change. The tools you may use may change over time, because like anything, someone will come out with a different feature that's quicker, it does something better, whether it's cost or whatever. But the actual principle of this flow seems to be working relatively well. So whether we stick with TrackDuck or move to Project Huddle, because you said there's a 10%, was it?
20% discount if you go to the wpbuilds.com/deals page. Yeah, I think it's worth mentioning. Thank you. That was a good plug, like that. So the next one is something that I have used. Interestingly, David Waumsley put a post in our Facebook group about this just yesterday. Because this is, I'm going to say a Chrome extension. It's more than that, but it's called Use Loom, but I'm just going to call it Loom. And do you want to tell us how you use it, what it does?
Yeah, it's been a fantastic tool. I know it's funny simple when you think about it, but it literally is a Chrome extension that records a video and records you of a journey of a website, screen recording.
Yeah.
And then if you want to, you can turn your webcam on and have it a bit more personal. Now, we started using it internally. So if we've got any internal feedback for the guys when they're on a project, it's got videos. Because you're recording the video, you can literally open another tab and go, this functionality on the site needs to obey this, this, and this. And then we've also used Loom links in the TrackDuck feedback, things like that when it begins together.
Yeah. The biggest thing for this, again, from a reader's perspective, is when you're talking to someone and they say, I want to make that button red, and you're saying, which button are you talking about? The video enables you to hover the mouse and literally pinpoint which area you're talking about. So again, even if you weren't using something like InVision for your TrackDuck, you could use Loom and record the video and say, this paragraph I want this updated to this bit of text or something. It just makes it really easy and visual for someone to understand what's going on.
Yeah.
And then we slowly introduced it more for feedback from clients as well. So bearing in mind you're having a bit more onboarding and a bit more learning, but it makes life a lot easier than a big phone call or big emails. They can literally in their own time record a video, and since we've done that, try and do them at 1 to 2 minutes rather than a 30-minute video.
You live and learn.
And it's just become easier, or they might have an idea. If you think of scoping out a new project or they've got an idea for a new feature, they can literally record a video in their own time, show them what they need, send it over to you. We can watch it, our devs can watch it, everyone can watch it and get an understanding. And then from that, when we record training videos, so we do a lot of on-site training, remote training, but then we do the bite-sized Loom videos that go in the back end of their dashboard.
I've kind of given up on emailing written replies to just about any client query, and instead using the equivalent of Loom. I use Loom a lot. I also have an app called Cloud App, which it basically does exactly the same thing, but it also allows me to sort of like capture screenshots and annotate them a bit like something like Skitch used to do. But it's the same principle. But I've never, and this was David's question, I never got a client to use it ever. And I think that's a really good, so long as you can coach them not to give you the 40-minute extended play version, the director's cut of the problem with the red button. That's great. I think that's ingenious. I love it. I absolutely love it. And who would have thought 5 years ago a tool like that would exist, which is so ludicrously simple? They've got a pro plan, I think, they've just released, and they've also got a desktop app now. I don't know what the benefits of those are. It's probably you can annotate the video with text or something. I don't really know, but I'm going to throw another one at you. I have another one called Crankwheel, which is a very bizarre name. It's a Chrome extension. But what this does is if a client phones you up, so you're actually on the phone, you enable Crankwheel, and it creates a short link. So I can't remember what it is, but it's very, very short. And you read it out to them over the phone, and then they type that into their browser. And whilst you're speaking on the phone, they can see what you're doing on your screen.
Right.
And there's no audio because the whole point of it is you're already on the phone. And I found that to be really useful as well. So, they phoned you up, there's a problem. Right, go to this link and we'll fix it. And I'll show you how to do it for next time. That's been quite good. But yeah, video, absolutely brilliant. And that moves us on to TestingBot, testingbot.com. I think we're probably, from its name, have a vague idea of what this is. Why do you use this?
So some of the larger sites, when they've got a lot of, say, custom features and functions, it's there for manual testing and automated testing. Both of them also record a video. So if you've written an automated test script, it would automatically test. It could be a contact form, for example, or a big application form. It would submit it, record a video, but then you could then assign that set of rules to different devices, different browsers. So if we get a request that it's, the site's got to be built for IE 9, 10 and 11 compatibility or things like that, we can then spin up one of those machines. It records the videos. For ongoing work and support after, if we're ever deploying any updates, we can use that and run automated tests. And something we're looking to roll out this year is linking it with things like Bitbucket, where we can deploy. Before we deploy the code, it can set off an automated test. If it fails, it won't deploy. If it passes, then it goes into the deploy pipeline. So, very handy tool for us.
Yeah. So when you say you write these little tests, how's that done? Is there like a GUI, a user interface where you tell it what the URL is, and then you sort of highlight, okay, I want that field filling in, it's a text field. I want that field filling in, it's a submit button, and I want to check for this this text message coming back returned. Or how do you even set up these tests?
So that we've been using a thing called Selenium, which is like, forgive me, again, not myself been doing it, but it's like a framework for testing. Okay. That you would write that sends to testing bot. From there, you would tell it to look out for classes and IDs.
Oh, okay, right.
And that's how. And then you would tell it to input this. And what's the expected result? Is it going to be yes or no, or foul? Go to the next page. That's how it generally works. And at the end of it, it will provide you the feedback, pass or fail. And I think in some cases, if it fails, you can then send off notifications through Slack or email that things have failed and so on.
Okay, so basically it's keeping you aware, and obviously with the Bitbucket integration, it's alerting you before you push something which ultimately breaks. But it's keeping you aware of it's like a sort of care plan thing, isn't it? This site is working. We can prove it's still working. The tests that we set up are passing every time. What about the whole manual thing? Do you ever actually get human beings? Because this company apparently does it. One of their strapline is automated and manual browser testing. Do you actually ever get physical human beings to sit down and do this stuff?
We've presented it to clients as an option. So it's the one that we've produced.
It's usertesting.com. I think they charge you, so you'd set up how many people, and you can select sort of the demographic and everything else that you want, and then you get real-time based recordings, and again screen recordings as well of someone using the site, and you can set tasks as well. I want someone to buy a product, and then they carry out that journey. But again, it just adds, from a client's perspective, you've got already quite a long list of largely part of the process, and then you're going to add something, a further testing sort of budget.
It depends on the client, I suppose. If the client's there and the budget's there and they've got the timeline there, then it's always a nice thing to get that manual test and feedback. Same as if you were going to go along the lines of accessibility testing. I remember when we went to WordCamp last year, forgive me, I can't remember the company, but they specialised in that manual accessibility and disability testing for feedback. If you've got the client and the requirements in there and the budget, then the more testing, the merrier, because you can never test enough.
Well, we said the dream site earlier was, you'd have everything in the process. You'd have copywriters and photographers and videographers, but you've the client timeline budget, and you've always got, always fighting somewhere.
Yeah, and this is one of those things where it nice to have it, but not necessarily essential. I do like it. It's if you're an enterprise client and you've paid really good money for your site to be built, this stuff I think would be de rigueur. You're not going to miss out on this, and the whole manual thing and listening to what somebody says and watching the flow of the cart, because people skipping their shopping cart and leaving it and abandoning it, that could be costing you millions if somebody simply doesn't understand what to do next. And also it gives you, I suppose, as a website, the nice kickback of this is you also as a web designer and a developer get a bit of information about, okay, next time we'll do it that way first. We didn't do that as well as we could have done. Fascinating.
So another tool might throw in there that's more of a post-launch tool that we didn't put in is Hotjar, that you might have heard of.
Yes, indeed, for heat maps.
big time for recording, heat maps and videos of what the users are doing and so on, and you can tag it specifically and stuff like that.
Have you ever watched those actually happening live? It's curious watching it, isn't it? It's really. I feel a bit weird watching people on websites as they're browsing around and seeing what they're doing.
But it's a great way that if you're looking for an after-sale technique, the site's live, it's functional. You're getting traffic to it, to be able to look at what people are doing, and if you've got, you've done A/B testing on a home page, you said, I think this is going to be the best version, or you've discussed internally that this is the page layout, and then you find out that the user is not doing the expected journey they want to do, or
perfect.
the journey.
Absolutely,
it's live feedback.
Well, yeah, if the client, we've got time, we generally, when we're onboarding a new client, hopefully 9 times out of 10 they've got Google Analytics to look at traffic. But if they've got the window, we like installing Hotjar anyway for a month, just to review what the data on the current site is doing before you even consider like the redevelopment.
Absolutely right. That was going to be my next point, is you've got to have data. You can't just sort of put Hotjar on, or whatever rival you're using, and then 2 days later go back and get anything meaningful. You've got to wait and wait. And then actually, it is amazing how quickly it comes in, and suddenly the whole screen's red, and you think, oh, God, they don't know what they're doing. The whole screen is red. Brilliant suggestion. There's just been a product out on one of the sort of website deal sites called Cux, CUX.io, which does a very similar thing. Maybe that's one to check out as well. And then the final one on the list of software as a service or apps to use is Bitbucket. I don't suppose we need to dwell on that too much. It's version control and sort of a repository for things. Anything particular about that you'd like to talk about?
Obviously, we probably use it like everyone else. We've obviously keep versions of the code. Just a thing this year, like we're looking to deploy like more the pipeline for, rather than a straight deploy. We're going to link in to review code, because we are working with more third parties. They might be committing code for code reviews.
Yep.
And that's where looking to integrate this with this testing bot as well.
Oh, I see. So it knows, don't commit because it's failed. Yeah, that is a really nice step, actually. I think that's really ingenious. And then we've got, we're going to change tack completely, and now we're changing to WordPress itself, and we're talking about plugins that we've used. And you've got a list of, what have we got? 2, 3, 4, 5 or 6 WordPress plugins that you've used that you like. This project needed. What are the ones that you're going to mention? So
one of the requirements here for the 25 websites is it needed to be multilingual. We had to do 13 languages in the end, which the client got translated, and WPML was our plugin of choice. Moreover, compatibility with other plugins at the time of it could have been Gravity Forms and so on, because I know there's some other great plugins out there, but it's been a fantastic plugin for us. Helped us obviously a lot with the translations. One of the biggest things with this particular project that we worked on, this phase 2, phase 3 approach I mentioned, the phase 2 was like, let's say, the King Ding setup, and we managed to get it translated from English into another 12 languages, taking it to 13. And then the aim of that was then to deploy it for the rest of the world, which goes on to how we cloned it. Yep. And that's where NS Cloner that we found to be a fantastic plugin that allowed us to literally clone the site we wanted, set up the obviously URLs, it does the URL rewrites itself, and manage to deploy it a lot quicker in a multi-site environment.
Yeah, I mean, I confess I've never even heard of this one, NS Cloner. So it's it's wp.org/plugins ns-cloner-site-copier. Cool. I mean, I know that like cloning, there's a million ways of doing this, from the command line right through to probably 100 different plugins. This one, never seen before, but I know it's hard to do the whole like sucking out a multi-site site individually, and a lot of plugins simply don't do that. And you've been happy, no fails, no gotchas.
Absolutely fantastic, and the reason we used that is because the direction of the requirements slightly changed from where we were going to slowly release, say, 5 websites for the rest of the world over a certain period. The requirement changed to actually deploy all their sites at the same time to give them a window to populate their products, recipes, news, and so on. So that's when it was kind of like, okay, let's, we'll take this on. Never, personally never done it before at that, that scale. Found the plugin, managed to clone it 23 times, and everyone's been fine logging in, putting their content in,
Very nice.
in a quick time frame as well.
Yeah, headache gone, and free, presumably, if it's on the WordPress.org repo.
Yeah, we did use the paid one, but in all honesty, we didn't actually use the features. Still,
good to give Never Settle, who looks like the developer for this, the cache, I suppose, just to keep that stuff going, because it's great. Never used it, never heard of it, but I'm glad to have come across a new one, because it's always nice to have a few up your sleeve. And then the next one, we all know, we've all heard of this one, Gravity Forms. Any reason that one over another one? Is there some connection between that and WPML or compatibility that works?
Yeah, a bit of WPML at the time, and I think we had tried Contact Form 7 and other ones in the past. What took us several years ago was we ended up using Gravity Forms for a very complex application process for a company, and we loved all its features. We train clients on it, and it's just become easier.
Yeah.
I know there's lots out there. They will have their pros and cons, but it went into it, with their application forms, their contact forms and everything. And it's, the client was also used to it, using from their existing consumer-facing site.
So you're using Gravity Forms to get the data from the clients, are you? So this information that they're putting in is going through a Gravity form?
So for the client, Gravity Forms would have gone in. They've got a vacancy module in there, and then the submission of the application would have used Gravity Forms.
Okay. Yeah, there's a whole heap of obvious options. You've got WP Forms and Ninja Forms and Formidable and all of that kind of stuff. But I think you're right. If one works and you've got no problems with it, use it, stick with it, learn it, make understand it truly very well. And then this one's nice. Presumably this is for the benefit of the client, not so much you. WP 101, which is a suite of training videos that you can drop in and the client can watch. That's what you're using it for, I'm guessing? Yeah,
so all the sites that we develop, it's very, we generally would support them after anyways with a support plan. And one of the parts of it is using WP 101 in the back end for them to keep up to date with the latest WordPress videos. We do provide remote and on-site training, but if the client is onboarding new staff and training, they just come in very handy to go over the basics. Then we use Loom videos and actually use the WP 101 custom video area to put in our own ones because, products area on this site that we launched, the recipes, they're not standard WordPress stuff. So they're videos that we've done that uses the WP 101 plugin to put them in.
Okay. So with WP 101, I'm not a user, I'm not a subscriber. There's an option to actually drop in your own videos, and it sits with their stack of videos, but obviously they're custom to whatever it is that you've built for them. That's cool. And then white label CMS. Do you use this to sort of hide the existence of WordPress, or are you happy saying this is WordPress? What are you doing with that?
So we're pretty happy with saying it's WordPress. We put in client logos to make it a bit more personal to them. The reason we use that for this particular project is our contact, being UK, was then the contact had to deploy with the rest of the world. So we needed to make an onboarding. This client would have had remote and on-site training and so on. But obviously, it'd be lovely to travel the world for training, or we could have done a webinar.
So
what we've done, there was lots of custom use Loom videos done on their site. All in English. All the companies obviously spoke English, so it was fine. We didn't have to use any subtitles or anything. But then they went into the white label CMS. So as they logged in, they got a very clean dashboard without all the other, stuff that loads. Your left-hand panel just had what they needed to, because if it raised questions, our contact was going to be overwhelmed with feedback of things they didn't really need to know or understand. And that worked really, really well because we've got some audit logins on the site and we can see when they're logging in, what pages are updated. We haven't spoke to them. They're using the videos. They're using the dashboard and populating their content. And they've not had any one-to-one WordPress training either. So it's been fantastic.
Yeah, again, there's a whole load of other options there, isn't there? I know that for WP 101, you've got things like video user manuals and white label CMS, which is also from the guys who make video user manuals. There's things like white label. Well, there's a whole bunch of other plugins, shall we say? I know that WPMU Dev do one called Brander. I think it's just been rebranded to, and all sorts. I can't even remember the names of them off the top of my head, but I know that white label CMS is a nice, straightforward one. It's just been updated, so there's obviously a lot of work gone into that recently. That is cool. Do you know we've been talking for 50 minutes, and it seems like about 8. But that's it. That's your process. That is a really interesting set of tools, and it, like I said right at the top, completely different to mine. I'm me. There's just me. I've got nobody to report to except me and the clients. So I have a completely different set of things that I use. No doubt, whoever is listening to this will go, yeah, I use that. I don't use that. But they look like interesting tools. What I'll do is I'll put all the links in the show notes if you want to go and click on them and download, find, use. And I'm sure that Martin and James will make themselves available when this podcast goes live. Thanks for coming on today, guys. Just before we finish, I always leave 2 or 3 minutes if you want to drop a Twitter handle or a promotional bit of content or, your web address, whatever. The floor is yours. Talk about yourselves.
Yeah, so Impact Media. We are brothers, as you can probably mention. We're a dedicated Essex-based...
They can't see us. It's an audio mark.
Actually, I don't know. If you stood next to each other, I wouldn't have pinned you as brothers anyway.
Dedicated WordPress agency, and we managed to be fortunate enough to get involved with WordPress in around 2008. We initially started bolting it in as a blog, as you do, with kind of some custom, let's say, not very good CMSs at the time until WordPress come out, and then obviously nowadays everything's built from WordPress.
We were building our own
CMS at the time, yes. And I say our typical approach is to provide clients a custom solution which generally take their existing website to the next level. So they might have had a site that's restricted, they might need to integrate with a third-party system, they might need some custom page templates designed, and that generally comes over to our flow of obviously designing that from the ground up. Basically,
we usually see it as a kind of there's 4 kind of types of businesses, and you've got this stage 1 business that is a startup, and they generally want to carry out projects themselves. They might not really need to know or want to understand what they need from the website. So anything's going to serve them as a purpose until people start hitting their website and they start seeing the value in a contact form, or this needs to do this and this needs to talk to that. Then they start going to the next stage where they might be looking at something like WordPress themes and templates, where again, there might be an off-the-shelf solution that is going to serve their industry. And like Martin said, it's when you say, I don't know, you're an estate agent, for example, and you want to bolt it into your back-end CRM system. So when you're uploading properties, they're going automatically on Rightmove and on your website at the same time. That's when you might need that next level sort of capability. And that's when you speak to someone like ourselves.
Very cool. So, James and Martin Coates from impactmedia.co.uk, thank you so much for coming on and telling us all about your process of your latest build. Nice one. Cheers, guys.
Thanks very much.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that. That was certainly refreshing. It was very nice to chat through these problems and solutions, I may add, with somebody other than David. So, yeah, really nice to chat to James and Martin Coates. I don't know how it is that they managed to be brothers and work together and still be friendly, but they seem to manage it well enough. Hopefully you got some useful tips in there. Perhaps you've written down some new tools. If not, everything that we mentioned pretty much is in the show notes. So if you go over to wpbuilds.com, you'll be able to find the podcast in the podcast archive, and you should therefore be able to click on links to go to the tools that were mentioned. The WP Builds podcast is brought to you today by WP and Up. 1 in 4 of us will be directly affected by mental health related illness. WP and Up supports and promotes positive mental health within the WordPress community. This is achieved through mentorship, events, training and counselling. Please help enable WP and Up by visiting wpandup.org/give. Okay, that's it. We will be back next Thursday for a brand new podcast. We'll also be back on Monday for 2 reasons. The first one will be our weekly WordPress news roundup. We have an audio version of that, which comes out very early in the morning, UK time. It's about 20 to 30 minutes long, and I sum up the WordPress news. But also we have at 2 p.m. UK time, we have the live version where we talk through that news with some special guests. So join us for any and all of those things. And all I've got to do now is fade in some cheesy music and say bye-bye for now.